Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this Datalab workshop, Introduction to Data Sourcing, aka Data Sorcery. My name is Ryan Wallace, and I'm the GIS and Data Science Librarian here at Washington University in St. Louis. The actual presentation part of this workshop shouldn't take more than an hour, despite the 2-hour time slot that I've reserved. That should leave us with plenty of time at the end for answering questions and demoing certain sources.
Let's say that you have a research idea and you're looking for data to use. Where should you look? First, you want to consider who might have collected the data that you're interested in and explore their website. A great first source is relevant government agencies at all levels, federal, state, and local. For instance, the USGS is the United States, that's the US Geological Survey. They're a great source for data on the natural world. The St. Louis Federal Reserve has a lot of national level economic data. The Missouri Department of Education is going to be a source if you're looking for Missouri school information, or the City of St. Louis Department of Health if you want very local information about health in this area. And then you can also find some nonprofit, non-governmental, or intergovernmental organizations that might have the data you're interested in. In this area, the East-West Gateway brings together a lot of resources for environmental data. And then Think Help St. Louis can give you information on uninsured population by zip codes. Or you can find data from private businesses or industry groups for free, but use these sources with more caution than usual. Because these people may have an agenda. And then, of course, there are other academic researchers. So if you're looking for data, you can also look for data sets cited in other publications. If the author has created their own data set, feel free to reach out to that author and ask for a copy of the data set. A lot of them are perfectly willing to share it. You can also look in their citations to see where they got their data. Outside of academia, some other publications that will also often be citing data sets include government reports, again at the federal, state, and local level, or gray literature. If you're not sure what gray literature is, it's things like reports and working papers or white papers produced outside of traditional publishing channels by NGOs and businesses. Again, use caution when you're approaching these sources, but they can be very useful, especially if they are citing peer-reviewed sources. You can use the stuff that they used for their own paper. If emailing an author directly makes you a little nervous, which I definitely understand, you can hope that they submitted a copy of their data to a repository. These repositories collect, manage, and preserve data sets for the long term, and more recent papers will often have this because it's often a term of the grant that people receive that they have to make this data publicly available in some way or another. You also have things like aggregators, which harvest information from multiple databases and repositories or institutions to bring them kind of all into one place and make them easier to find. So a private example of this would be a Google dataset search, or a government source would be data.gov. So we are going to take a little look at data.gov. So it is just data.gov. Okay. So data.gov provides access to datasets published across the federal government. Federal agencies are required to make this data available to the public. Many local and state governments also choose to publish their data here. So you can see that they've got a huge number of datasets right there. The advantages are that it's a clear, clean interface with clearly labeled data types. But because there is so much here, it can often be pretty difficult to sift through this. That's a problem with pretty much every aggregator. So I will just say that I am interested in climate change. So even that search is pulling up like 20,000 things. The nice thing about this is over here on the side, you can see that you've got a lot of ways of filtering information. If there made sense to have like specific spatial change, you could zoom in on this map. I don't know, Rolla, and draw a box around the information, like the area that you're specifically interested in. And that knocked it down to only about 1,200. Anything that covers the entire nation is probably going to be included in this because that's what is there. You've got specific topics. So if somebody has tagged this with climate or a narrower thing, you can find that. Data set type, everything in here is geospatial data. And you can even see and filter by, say, who created the data, what format the data comes in, whether it's a federal or state government thing, or the organizations and the publishers. So you could also, if you're just browsing, take a look at the most popular data sets. The city of Los Angeles has put their crime data in here. You've got a list of every winning Powerball number from the state of New York since 2010. Oh, this is kind of fun. We'll take a look at this. This is the frequency of baby names from people who have applied for Social Security cards for, what is that? 140 years? So it'll tell you more information about it. You kind of get a summary. You get whether or not the data is intended for public access and use. So this is Creative Commons. You can use this in any way you want, commercial or not. It'll give you a place to download the data. And you can go to the Social Security Administration's page to learn a little bit more about it. And that's the same thing. I don't know why they have that twice. And then you can also have some background information. And I'm not going to download it now, but there's also, when you download it, it's not just the data, but there's also a README to tell you a little bit more about what's in the data set. But that is data.gov. All right. And so back to repositories. They can be divided broadly into two groups, general and disciplinary. The advantage to using a general repository are they somewhat easier to deposit into, and therefore they have a lot more data. On the other hand, they often reject and do not store data that has personally identifiable markers. So you may have to go hunting in a disciplinary repository for data that might have that. A lot of medical data is going to be covered by that kind of thing. With their narrower focus, it may be easier to find the data that you're looking for in a disciplinary repository. Figshare, Dryad, and our very own WashU Research Data Repository are some places to start in the general repository sphere. If you want to look through the disciplinary repositories but don't know where to start, check out RE3 Data. This site is like a search engine for research data depositories. And it will let you search through its registry of repositories. And we are going to, so this is RE3 data. So if you're looking for, say, a planetary data, like something about Mars. So there are a number of planetary specific, the ESA Planetary Science. So this is the European Space Agency's Planetary Science Archive. So they're probably going to have any data that's generated by their missions. And if we click on that, it will tell us a little bit more information about the repository. So you've got the description, you've got some subjects, the link to go to it. If you need If you have questions about it, this is the contact information. And you've got the research data repository language is English. So this is a handy thing if you're not sure where to start looking. And then stop. WashU has our own repository that researchers who are like faculty or graduate students at WashU can submit their data. So again, we'll look for maybe information about Mars. And so this is, so it's the code and the results for a basically unmixing spectral data. I don't entirely understand this, but if this is what you're looking for, this is where you could find it. And back to the presentation. All right. And if you're feeling overwhelmed with all of these options and don't know where to start, speaking with a WashU subject librarian could help you narrow down some potential avenues. I've included the names and email links to some relevant subject librarians on this slide. Felicia in the business library, Lori in social work, Melissa in public health and social work. Come to me if you're looking for GIS and geospatial data, and then reach out to the medical library if you're looking for clinical or medical information. And then one last thing when searching for data sets, always check the license on the data set to make sure that it's something that you can use. I've included a lot of different types of sources in these last few slides, and they may have different restrictions on reuse, particularly non-governmental or non-academic sources. So those of you in the medical community are also very aware of HIPAA and privacy restraints regarding personally identifiable data. And that is something that can come up in any field with human subjects. And be aware of how the data you're looking for can be shared. And so we're going to take a short 3-minute break to just let you think about that or use the restroom if you need to. I will see you again in 3 minutes. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to talk next about evaluating your data sources, starting with the documentation. So I'm sure that any of you who have ever done a bit of research have run into the problem of data sets without proper documentation, which can be very frustrating. When others produce good documentation, it can help you understand someone else's data and decide if and how it might be useful for your research project. And data sets without any documentation are difficult to understand and difficult to share. Generally speaking, if you can't find documentation on a data set, you shouldn't use it. You don't know when the data was collected or how or by who, or maybe even the units of measure used by any figures, depending on how poorly it's been documented. There are 3 general types of documentation that you might run into: the README, the data dictionary, and the code book. So a README is a text file that contains metadata about the data set. Metadata is data about data. As I just mentioned, this kind of information is critical to understanding and evaluating a data set. Sometimes you'll see it as part of a README file. Sometimes it is listed separately or labeled as metadata. The list on the slide are the types of metadata we require for any data set in the WashU data repository for a data set submission. So if it's missing any of these, we will not accept it until the author can provide that information. So you'll notice that one of the items is an inventory of file names and a brief description of those files. So the data dictionary expands on that list and that description. If the data set includes any kind of tabular data, like spreadsheets, a data dictionary is required. This would include a list of fields in the table and what each field means. Um, and then this description often includes the units of measurement, the precision, and the range of values involved. And then the final type of documentation is called a codebook. This is like a data dictionary for qualitative data, such as coded survey responses and classifications. It should also additionally describe the layout and structure of the data file. Once you have found data and have access to its documentation, you should be able to make an evaluation on a data set and decide if it is usable for your research. So these are the types of questions you should be asking of the data when you're evaluating how data was collected. What were the methods or instruments that were used for data collection? Is the data set an accurate representation of the population? What is the sample size and how were the participants recruited? So for example, let's say a data set exists of social media users' opinions about a political candidate. Because active social media posters represent only a certain percentage of all voting age Americans, you can only infer what that percentage of Americans think of a candidate, not what all Americans think of a candidate. You should also examine the variables themselves in a data set closely. Look for gaps or holes in your data. Are there empty cells or missing years? There may be a valid reason for these gaps, or they may indicate a flawed data set. And sometimes we have to make do with a flawed data set and acknowledge the flaws. For example, if a data collection instrument such as thermometer broke on a specific date, we may never be able to fill in that missing data, though with other sources, we may be able to estimate what was in that gap. Other questions would be, is the variable using the right level of measurement? Is the data using raw numbers or proportional values? Is there a margin of error included in the data set? And then I've included another link to more questions to ask of variables specifically. So in this next section, we are going to transition from general data sources to examples and lists of specific sources. And I do want to say right here, there's going to be a lot of links on these slides, but I am going to send you guys the slides and a video of this presentation, so you do not have to be frantically writing things down right now. So one of the best sources for data about people, socioeconomic and demographic data in the United States is the US Census. I go to this all the time, that we will see in a little bit that we're having some trouble right now. The United States Census Bureau administers and produces a number of products and surveys, but the two good places to begin are the decennial census and the American Community Survey. The decennial census is probably what you think of when someone mentions the census. It's designed to count every individual in the United States every 10 years. And this captures, for the most part, location, age, race, and sex. But what do you do for data in the intervening years? Or what if you want a little bit more detail? That's where the American Community Survey comes in. The ACS is a survey done at a much smaller scale every year, a sample of about 3.5 million people, and asks more detailed questions like educational attainment, employment, transportation, and internet access, for example. Between the two products, a researcher can find counts and estimates of populations based on a variety of subjects, including but not limited to the things listed here. And then there's two major considerations when selecting census data. The first is the census geography level. The data is gathered at an individual address level, but of course we can't publish that for privacy reasons. Instead, the smallest level that the data is aggregated to or sort of summarized at is, spatially speaking, the census block. You don't need to memorize this, but the minimum size for a census block is about 7/10 of an acre if bounded on all sides by roads. So in an urban context, that's smaller than a neighborhood. Block groups are made up of blocks. Census tracts are made up of block groups. Counties are composed of census tracts, and counties are aggregated into states, as you can kind of see here. For American Community Survey data, a smaller geography will have greater statistical margins of error just because you're using a smaller number of people to get that estimate. The sample sizes are smaller. When we get into the block size, margins of error can be greater than the population of the block. That isn't to discount their usefulness entirely, but you do have to pay attention to that. Generally speaking, the census tract is the preferred census geography for a lot of projects, as it's a good balance between smaller size and greater accuracy. And then besides geographic aggregation, we should also consider the issue of time. The decennial census is a point-in-time snapshot every 10 years. That's not that complicated. The ACS, however, will aggregate its snapshots in two ways. It used to be more than that, but it's only two now. So your major choice is between using a 1-year aggregation level and a 5-year aggregation level. The 1-year product is aggregated, as the name suggests, over a 12-month period. These products come out every year in September. Because they cover only a single year, this product has a smaller sample size than the 5-year estimates and are therefore less reliable, especially at smaller geographies. In fact, because of statistical inaccuracies, the government doesn't even make certain measurements available at geographies smaller than the census tract. So you would use the 1-year product when currency, like how recent this information is, or if you are analyzing larger geographic areas, or you need to be tracking sudden changes, like changes on the scale where a year makes sense. The other major choice is the 5-year product, which is averaged over a moving 60-month period. So for instance, the product that's going to be released later this year will cover between January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2024. So all of this aggregation delays the release by at least a few months and sometimes longer. But the sample sizes are 5 times larger than in the 1-year product because it's a longer time period, so it's much more reliable. Especially where research is concerned, the 5-year product is generally more recommended. Use it when precision is more important or when analyzing several general trends or smaller populations. But why does this matter? If you're just looking at a single year, it really doesn't. Pick the 5-year census tract and have at it. But especially if you are looking at data over time, you need to make sure that your products match up and you are measuring the same things over time. This is made more difficult by the fact that the census questions and the census geographies change over time. Census blocks are added and divided as populations migrate and grow. And then we might see certain questions related to things like gender or nativity status changed, and they have changed in the past. So a fun example, the 1950 census counted rail cars as a living arrangement in the same way we would now consider apartments or single-family homes. And then a major change also is that like racial categories change. A lot of the very earliest census data will really only just have Black, white, and other, whereas the modern census has far more, including Native American, Asian Pacific Islander, and other things that were just lumped under other before. And then another consideration is that the census and the American Community Survey have always historically undercounted populations of young children, people of color, rural residents, and low-income households at higher rates than other populations. So the numbers for them are going to just be a little less reliable. Other low response groups include people who move pretty frequently, foreign-born, populations, folks with lower educational attainment, and folks who are just generally distrustful of authority. So, census demo. Uh, so normally we would show you data.census.gov, but because of the government shutdown, that website is not currently working. Hopefully it will be working again real soon. So I am going to show you a alternate source of census data, but unfortunately this is a WashU subscription product. So if you are not with WashU, you are not going to be able to access this. But you can look, and a lot of the things that we will filter by are things that are normally available on data.census.gov. It's the exact same data, it's just that the interface is a little bit different. So let's switch over. Okay. So this is the website. I will, for WashU users, show you how to get to this. If you go to library.woostel.edu and drop down this menu to Database Finder. Quick search, the default is just going to search the catalog. This is going to search our list of databases. And then search Social Explorer. It'll come right up. If you're not on the WashU network, when you click on this link, you will probably be asked to log in with your Woostel key and password. But I'm on campus, so it's just going to take me straight there. So Social Explorer has two alternate methods, two main methods of accessing the data. There is a map-based interface, and then there is a more table-based interface. I'm going to start with the table-based because that's the most similar to what you would be seeing in census.gov. So it lets you here choose between the different census products that I was talking about. So that's the decennial, that's every 10 years. The 5-year American Community Survey, the 3-year, they don't say here, okay. They stopped publishing that in 2013. So only if your research question is covering the area that that's covering would I advise using that, because you won't be able to compare it to modern numbers. And then there's a lot of other stuff here. But I'm going to go to the American Community Survey 5-year. And I'm going to start my report on the most recent thing that they've got available. And so we just chose the time aspect that we wanted. We've got the 2023 data, and now we're going to choose the geography. I'm interested in something pretty local. So I'm going to go down to state, county, and then census tract. It's going to ask me to choose a state. I am going to choose Missouri. Going to choose a county. So WashU is located in St. Louis County and city. So I'm going to choose both of these. St. Louis County, and I want to add all of the census tracts in St. Louis County. And you can see down here in the box that I've added that. But then I can go here and do St. Louis City and do the same thing. So it's going to return results for all the census tracts in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. Proceed to tables. And now it's going to give me every single table in the American Community Survey. That is a lot of information. It can be helpful to sort of familiarize yourself ahead of time with all of the different information that's available in the survey. But let's say that my project is looking at, so I probably want the total population and the population density. And then I think I want to look at employment. So I am going to, I'm going to look at all of these. I'm going to press Shift so I can select pretty much all of these, and I'm going to add them down here. And so this is going to be all of the different tables that are going to be included in my results. And so I can show them. And this is just a preview. This is not the whole thing because there are hundreds of census tracts between St. Louis County and St. Louis, Missouri. They're just showing me the first 5 just to give me a sample of what I am like going to get when I download this. That's all of that. It includes the raw numbers and includes the percentages, which is nice. So now I could download this as an Excel file, or if I wanted a little bit more control over what I want to get, I can go to data download and it's got some options. If I was going to import this into a statistical program called Stata, I would do a tab delimited file, but I'm not doing that, so I'm going to ignore that. I would like to look at the column labels in the first row. And I want the percentages. And then I have the choice between just a regular CSV, which is just like a text file. It stands for comma separated values. And you can open it up in a spreadsheet program like Excel or something else. And then if I'm using, again, some specific stats programs, I can download it in a format that will work well in those. If I just click on this, open that file. And once this is open, I will switch over to Excel. So this is what it looks like. The GeoID is a identifier for that specific census tract. If you have another source of data that's divided up by census tracts, you'll use this number to kind of aggregate this data with your own data, or not aggregate, join. This is that same number broken down, like kind of step by step, which is interesting, but the actual data is over here. So you've got kind of this computery name for the column header, and then you've got above it an explanation for what that actually means in like natural language. But that's what you've got. And then you can just do whatever you need to do with that. I'm going to close that. If you want to use this to make a map, you're going to have to join that to a like a map file of all of those census tracts, which is a separate topic. That is too much for this presentation. Doop. Cool. We just did that. All right. So this is a lot of data. Again, I'm going to send you guys these slides so you can read them at your leisure. But these are kind of the top sources that I would direct someone to if they are looking for health data. First and foremost, Becker Medical Library has a guide to health statistics, which has a ton of super helpful resources. And then most of the data sources on the following slides are federal sources, which are usually pretty reliable. Right now, pretty much every federal website, the data might still be there, but nothing is being updated. And if you have any questions, there is nobody there to answer them. Again, hopefully that will be fixed soon. So because this is health-related data, this is people data, you're often not going to find anything at a geographic level more local than a county. Because say if you're looking for a file of, where are people with a specific disease located? If it's a rare enough disease, it can be, you might only have 5 people in a specific area that have it, which means that any of the information attached to it is pretty easy to attach to that specific person. So they're going to aggregate that at a like higher level. But these sources do have a data from a number of different places, so you may find something a little bit more local. For instance, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is primarily county and state level data, but you can look at hospital by hospital levels of Medicare disparities. And then the CDC Places data is actually model based. So they use kind of small sample statistical methods, I think is what they said, um, to estimate at a lower level, like a smaller level, what the prevalence of a lot of these different like asthma, obesity, that kind of thing. Health continued. We've seen a lot of interest in the social determinants of health coming from the medical side of campus. So um, we do have some information about that mapping disparities of social determinants of health. And then some of these sources will also have like um, county level data. These are a little bit more local to us. And then economic data. These are free sources. The Federal Reserve economic data has exactly what it says. It's a clearinghouse for economic data. The US Census also collects economic information. If you saw on that list, you've got things like what industry do people work at? The Bureau of Labor and Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis also have quite a bit of information. And I've linked here the Business Library's Guide to Industry and Market Research, which is going to provide you with a lot more resources, both free and subscription on that page. If you're not sure what the North American Industry Classification System, it's essentially every industry and sub-industry is assigned a specific number, and then that can help you do collect, analyze, and publish statistics based on like industry. Um, and then these are subscription sources that WashU people have access to. Social Explorer, we looked at that. Data Axle's got a huge number of like address and ownership information for like millions and millions of businesses. Public opinion stuff, they're in Gallup, and I think Policy Collins has that too. And then this is just our database finder where you can find all of the databases that WashU subscribes to. If you are, again, interested in doing GIS-based stuff, we do have a license for Esri's business analysis, which has a lot of the demographic and business information already joined to GIS information. So that saves a step when you're making maps and things. And just reach out to me if you're interested in learning how to get access to that. Environmental data, again, the US Geological Survey is a major source for hydrological, natural disasters, any kind of environmental data. There used to be a really nice site that had a lot of information about the American infrastructure, more than just in this, transportation, hospitals, wastewater treatment plants, landfills, all of that. That was recently taken down, though some of the data can be found in other sources, but some of it is pretty much gone forever. And then Climate Trace tracks greenhouse gas emissions. GIS. We've got a GIS live guide with even more links than are included here. We have a subscription to Esri. Esri is the people that make the major Arc or GIS software, Arc Pro. These are authoritative, curated geospatial data that you can just bring into your project and use without worrying about a lot of stuff. Business analyst again, and then for local geospatial data, MISDIS and the Illinois Geospatial Data Clearinghouse both have a large number of data sets produced by Mostly the state government. All right, that is it for me. Are there any questions? Thank you so much for coming.